The second essay topic in the essay paper this year was the empires of the future will be empires of the mind. I think out of all the essay topics this year, this one was my favorite because it is futuristic, it's almost science fiction-y in its language, in its nature, and it's just a very interesting analysis of humankind. Seen from the point of view of empire, seen from the point of view of what is power, what is it that makes empires empires. And like the previous essay, this one also has a certain historical angle. You have to talk about how empires have built themselves in the past. You can talk about the British Empire, which gained dominance because of its navy, because they had command over the sea routes, and because everybody was fighting over the sea routes during the time of imperialism, at the rise of imperialism. You can talk about civilizations that have come before it. You can talk about the Roman civilization, which was a very martial civilization that was built not only on military might, but on ideology. You can talk about various other civilizations. You can talk about warfare. And you can say, as frequent and as recent as the world wars, including, in fact, the Cold War between the USA and the USSR, that the fight between empires, that the combat between empires was one of might. It was one of physical prowess. It was one of who has the better tanks, who has missiles that can travel further into space and time, who has more nuclear weapons, who has more tanks, who has a bigger military, who has more raw destructive power. That now is changing. In fact, a very interesting analysis is very recently, in the previous year or the year before that, the UPSC asked a question which said, and this was another essay topic, the essay topic said, technology is the silent player in international relations. That essay topic aligns very nicely with this one. And what you can do here is, after you give your historical analysis, you can talk about how things are changing and what's happening in the future. Here, you have to talk about technology. This essay topic is not complete without that. You have to talk about how technology centralizes power and how technology does not obey borders. That's super important, that element of globalization, that element of that free flow of information, the World Wide Web, artificial intelligence, those are central themes that have to appear in this essay, right? And then you have to talk about intellectual property also, because you see, the essay topic is saying empires of the future will be empires of the mind. And that means it has to have something less to do with actual physical prowess, actual military might, more to do with intelligence, more to do with who has an advantage in terms of technology, in terms of data, in terms of know-how. And you can use various examples from the examples that are all around you. Some of these interesting examples, of course, AI. AI has to feature in this essay no matter what. Interesting example is Neuralink. Neuralink, brain-computer interface. Those things, as they become developed, and the people who gain access to them will gain more advantage, disproportionate advantage over others that don't. That is true not only for nations, Remember, when the essay topic is saying empires, the empires it is referring to can be empires which are political, empires which are national, but also empires which are corporate. So it can include organizations, it can include individuals, it can include companies like Google and Facebook. You should mention that. Those are empires, legitimate empires. In fact, some would argue empires which are much bigger and more powerful than nations all put together. They do have that power with them, right? You can also mention recently, for instance, how technology is playing such a huge role in the Russia-Ukraine conflict, right? Here, so one example is Russia cut off the internet and Ukraine was without any connectivity to the rest of the world. But what happened was Elon Musk supplied Ukraine with Skylink, right? And they were able to access the internet and they were able to get access, and then the US supported this initiative. And so one private player was able to change the course of a big conflict that is a war that is ongoing right now. So you can use stuff like that, right? You can also use very recent developments that have happened in the field of data science. You can also use genetic engineering and intellectual property. The people who own the technology have the power to change the genome. What you mean by power of empires, the definition of power itself is now changing, right? And That is why you hear so much about cyber warfare. Again, cyber warfare is one of those things that you can insert and should insert in this essay. And if you are going to go down that road, you might want to also include space warfare. You might want to include the element of space technology and how everybody is now fighting over that last frontier, which is space. So these are some of the central themes. Now the narrative. You have to talk about in this essay. So this essay does not have a very linear, very straightforward or commonsensical narrative. What I mean by that is that there are ways to mold it. You don't have to agree with the statement. Remember that. The empires of the future are empires of the mind. Don't forget that it was Sun Tzu who said many thousands of years ago that battles are won by the mind and not by militaries. Sun Tzu, The Art of War. Chanakya said that. Everybody who is anybody who can be called a statesman, Chanakya, Sun Tzu, Machiavelli, have emphasized on strategy, have emphasized on intelligence, have emphasized on being informed, on intelligence network, and on being better equipped, not only with technology, whatever technology was available at that time, but with information. So the element of the mind into the battle was always very much there. But the outward manifestation of power always was military might. That is now changing. So that is what you can add to that. Now, when you come to the narrative, like I said, the narrative can follow. If I was to write it, and this is only my opinion, if I was to write it, I would do it like I just described it. I would first agree with the statement. I would say that yes, it was normally considered to be military might, and now that is changing, blah, 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 everything that I just said. Then I would say, but that's not always the case. The central role of the mind has never changed. It's just that the manifestations of how intelligence can be harnessed is changing now, with AI and whatever I've just mentioned. Then I would say that it is not as if the empires are empires of mind. They were always empires of mind. It is who can sustain it for longer, who has better control over it. And not only is it the empires of the mind that will be the future, the definition of empires itself is changing. Technology can change the definition of an empire. Here you can insert what I said about how an empire can not only be a nation necessarily, can be a corporate entity, can be an individual, whatever. Now we come to the structure. How would you structure this essay? The empires of the future will be empires of the mind. In the introduction, I would more or less agree with the statement, but I would say that the role of the mind cannot be understated. I would add that sort of a caveat so that the examiner knows that I'm going to present some counter argument at least. I'm not going to completely just agree with the essay topic just like that, right? Then I'm going to proceed. I'm going to write about what the historical analysis of this is, how previous empires have held power or domination over each other by using force, by having more prowess, by being more militarily strong. And then I would come on to the future and how that is changing. I would talk about the rise of China. I would talk about the multipolar world. But I would also talk about how in the multipolar world, the United States still holds so much say, so much power because of their technological might. And then I would proceed towards how things are changing in the future. And maybe I would end this essay on a slightly positive note and perhaps come to the conclusion that if, in fact, the empires of the future turn out to be empires of the mind, perhaps they can also turn out to be empires of the heart, and that we can integrate the heart and that sense of companionship and that sense of that one family, Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, the idea that we believe in India as to that world being one big family. I would insert that, would add a very nice tone to my essay at the end of the essay, and that would be how I structure it. So like I said, what I just told you is those three parts of this essay topic: the central themes, the narrative, and the structure of how I would do it. Obviously, there are multiple ways to do this. There are points which you would have written that I did not say. There are points which you may not have written that I did speak of. Does not matter. What matters is, did you present it in an organized manner? Did you make sense? Did you go on a tangent? Did you give certain counter arguments? Did you give a complete analysis? Did you come to an interesting conclusion? Did you say something that was meant to be said? Was your point to the point? This is essentially what they will score you on, and obviously the type of language you have used. So that's about it. And this essay, if you have written it, I think more or less close or resembling that template, will fetch you a decent amount of marks. That's all for this as a topic.